Alrighty, let's jump in. So today we're going to be looking at making the second space. So if you have a look here, this is actually what we did last week. All of these assets were made in Unity actually. So all these walls and all these elements are made with, I think, a cube. I don't think I used anything else but a cube. Now this is not using light mapping. That got a bit complicated because we were using the Unity cube. But today we'll be able to focus a bit more on creating, what would you call it? Creating an element that is able to be light mapped better, because we're going to be making it in Blender first. So we'll do a quick, very quick. There's plenty, like thousands of Blender tutorials out there, although we'll probably get there eventually. You could always make the donut. Everyone has to make the donut if you're playing with Blender. And of course you could use 3D Studio Max, Maya, even Rhino and Revit. Although the last two, you have to be sort of a little bit careful with the poly count. So I think, which one is it? Rhino, like the latest version of Rhino has some poly, what would you call it? Poly count optimization tools. I don't think Revit is there yet. So you might even have to go to Blender after creating your assets to make sure that the poly count is sort of a reasonable level. So basically what I'd like to do is create this space once again in Blender, and we'll have a little bit more control over it, and also just be able to unwrap it. So that means that you can, well, let's say if you had a cube and if you want to texture that, you're looking at a texture which is a 2D object and trying to put it on a 3D object, so you kind of have to unwrap the 3D object so it knows where to put that 2D texture. So we'll be looking at that today. As well as, if we get time, I'd like to do light mapping and light probes. Light probes, well, light mapping. Light mapping is where you'll bake the lighting information into a texture. Unity can do this, and relatively well with a bit of tweaking of the numbers that you get to play with. But you'll be able to have really, really nice lighting with spotlights and direct lights and all sorts of things. Even the skybox can play a part in that. But the catch is, with a baked texture for lighting, you can't update it. So if you have a character like this guy, you'll notice that it is live, and therefore you need sort of shadows, or you can have sort of shadows, but real-time lights are more expensive. So generally a good space will have 1 to 2 real-time lights, so maybe a directional light for shadows and things like that, but all of the other sort of, let's say, detailed lights and even like medium level lights will be baked. So it looks really, really nice. Has an element of shadow, but it works really, really well in most browsers, for example. And then we will be looking at light probes. So as noted with light maps, it's all baked, but an avatar is not static, so you definitely want shadows, but you also want some of that light mapping information to be applied to your dynamic objects, such as avatars or animated objects. So light probes is another performant way or optimized way to allow you to light your space. So we'll probably be looking at those ones mainly. So building assets in Blender, importing those into Unity, setting up materials. I'll probably grab the same materials as the last space. We want to make it look kind of as close as possible to this, but maybe better. And then light mapping and light probes. And if we get a chance, reflection probes as well. And I'll worry about them if I get to them. That said, all of these have docs. So if you're interested in checking out any of the more detailed approaches to any of these, we have more than enough resources in both video and doc format in the docs.monaverse.com or the YouTube channel. So, that's our space. Let's get into it. So first up, we of course need to create the Unity space. Once again, I prefer to do this first because then all of the folders are created for us to download our assets into and things like that. So, my second space. My approach to it is putting one called builds. That way you can sort of have somewhere to put all of your assets and builds in like organized way. So I'll put all the assets and things here if need be, put the builds in here, and then I can copy and paste backups if I need to. So I'll usually rename this one to one, let's say your second space. Right, so there's that. And then I'm going to open that in Unity. How is everyone today? Making cool stuff? Feel free to shout it in the chat. Would love to hear what you're working on this week. Open. So my second space, builds, and the project that we unzipped. So we have that, and then just go open. Hey Unji, how's it going? Glad to hear. Are you gonna follow along with the tutorial? You'll need Blender and Unity 2022.23. Actually, on that, let's go to the docs and have a quick look at this. So, looking at the docs, basically we have building spaces and get started. Everything you need is here. So, if you do not have Unity 2022.2.3, which is the exact version you need to use, you can download the Unity Hub, and then click on this one button, and that will load 2022.2.3 into Unity Hub, so that's very useful. Make sure that you install the WebGL module when the installation comes up. So that is very important. If you don't do that, you won't be able to build to Mona. Hey Zap, how's it going? So once you have a WebGL version of 2022.23, you can download the Mona template SDK from our GitHub. Just use the code like download zip. Let's go there. So go to code and then go download zip, which I had on my desktop. Extract that, and that's your project. Now we're looking at open the template SDK, which we've done. And then we'll look at opening the Mona scenes. How's that for timing? That's great. All right, up here we have Mona. Go to load space scenes. And then go up here to untitled, right mouse click, and then go remove scene. Done. You have your template. If you wanted to, why not? Press on playground up here. Usually, depending on, I think a Mac, I don't know if a Mac actually opens up the Explorer, but in Windows it does. So either way, it will open up your space exports folder, which has the playground files. This web browser window will come up, which is monaverse.com/playground. Drag and drop. And ta-da! We have our space. So yeah, done. That's the basics of Mona in one. So that said, we did all of that last week. And then though, this time we're going to be looking at importing 3D assets. So we're going to be looking at making some things in Blender, adding to them to space, and portals and things like that. So let's get into that. Okay, so what I'm going to do from last week's workshop is I have some assets, mostly textures, that I'm just going to pull over. Now, I did get these from... Where did I get them from? In the docs. Everything is in the docs. We have resources, and asset resources, and textures. So I think these are CG bookcase textures. So, or ambient CG. These are all great resources in regards to CC0, I think it's called. Assets that you can pull from elsewhere. So let's get some of those to save a bit of time. Where is that? Here we go. So we've got our first space, assets, add your textures. What was it? We had the brick wall with normal. We had the concrete. Did we have concrete? Sure, why not? Normal. Galvanized steel, if I recall. Normal. I also made a metallic smoothness map. We also have the HDR for the skybox. And I'm gonna steal these as well. So we've got our normal. Grab those, move them across here. Copy. Excellent. Done. Close that. So now that I've copied these into the Explorer, if I click on this, it will load them. And then we have a bunch of textures. Let's make the materials now, just to get that out of the way. So, quick introduction to materials. Mouse click. Now, when it comes to Blender, making the materials, a lot of people want, and rightfully so, a lot of people want to make those materials in Blender, and when you import them, it just magically appears and looks great. It won't. Unless you use GLBs, and Unity doesn't actually support GLB by default. There are ways to do it, but we're not going to go into that. So what I generally recommend is create your assets in Blender, assign materials, like simple materials with simple names, or with whatever names you want, to be honest, and then just put a color. And then, once you import that into Unity, make the materials in Unity. Now, the reason we do that is because if you click on material, let's call this one, what do we want to call it? Corrugated. We'll do that one first. Let's go metal, because I have my naming conventions. And go to inspector. Unity has its own way of doing materials, basically. So you'll have your albedo, which is your base colors. You'll have your metallic and smoothness, which is a very, unfortunately, annoying approach, because everyone else uses kind of metallic and roughness. So metallic is kind of, how do you describe it except for metallic? It's kind of shiny, or how reflective, I guess you could say. And smoothness is kind of how polished. Now, Unity puts these two together into one texture, and if you just roll over metallic, you'll see that it says metallic R and smoothness A. So metallic is sort of black and white on the R channel, or the red channel, in Photoshop. And the smoothness, so white or 1 is very smooth and polished, and 0 or black is very rough, I guess you could say. So the alpha channel in that particular texture is the smoothness level. So one, it's a bit annoying to make in Photoshop. It's easy to make in something like Substance Painter. So you can export it and does it great. But if you're making it manually, it's a bit of a mess. So I did cover that last week. We can look at that maybe if need be. If anyone wants a review of that, feel free to ask. Yeah, the asset library is... like, we got a lot of stuff there. We had one of the challenges a while back, went into it. We also have some tools from this library. So yeah, you got the library resources, which is quite a lot, and a lot of builders submitted resources in there, which would be great. We have the Mona library, which also has sort of like a load probe generator, AI material generator, Vox file importer if we use that. We have some assets that people, or these ones I made, so doors and things, they're using reactors and stuff. And then you have the community assets, which we did a challenge a long time ago for portals, and a couple of other things. So if you need any of those, feel free to jump in and pull them apart, because that's what they're there for. Another resource that people could use is the Mona Playground, which is this one. We actually don't use this because I don't think I've updated it to the 2022 yet, so I need to get on that. So that said, so I'm gonna hide that for now. You can't see it, but this space will be updated and put online, and people can pull this space apart, and that has a lot of the elements of a Mona space as well. So we definitely have resources, I'll say that much. Now, where was I? Back to workshops are very tangential, but yes, anyway. So, metal corrugated. So, we have our albedo, which is base color, metallic and smoothness, which you can adjust all of these. If you just want to add a color, you can have red. You can even do opacity down here. So you can have see-through models, or glass, for example. But if you're using alpha, make sure to change the rendering mode from opaque to cutout, fade, or transparent. Now, these will adjust... these are performance levels. So cutout is a simple, like, on and off color. Fade is, can use blend, but it doesn't... I don't think it keeps reflective probes in mind and stuff like that. And then transparent has reflection probes and stuff like that. So higher up is better, but doesn't look as good for different reasons. So performance is always at the top of your mind. Metallic, you can go up and down from here. So let's go... whoops. Let's look at some examples here. So metallic is very metallic, and then you have sort of the reflection, and then down for a sort of a matte. And then down here, a very matte sort of plastic, and then a very shiny plastic. So metallic sort of adds... I don't know how to describe it, to be honest. More metallic. Now, on this, though, because I'd like to spend a moment on the reflection elements, notice how if you have, like, a very metallic, very smooth asset, the reflection of the asset is very clear. Now, the problem with this is the reflection probe, which is what this would reflect, would need to be very high quality, like 2048 by 2048, which is a very large file size, which adds to the file size of the space, which starts getting problematic around the 180, 200 meg. We do allow 250 meg spaces, but I recommend going as small as possible, purely because people have to download that before they even get into your space. So Small is good. So one way around that, though, is if you move this down, it starts getting blurrier. So even to, say, 0.8. And that means that you could get your reflection probes down to 1024 by 1024 without too much problems. And that would look fine. And even less if you wanted to. So if we put this to, say, 0.8, and we put that to 0.5, maybe even even 0.8. 0.8. There we go. So this, you would probably be able to get a very small reflection probe and still look quite good. And that would be a really good way to look good, but also be quite performant. Yeah. Yes, so there's like even just these two sliders, well, three sliders if you include color, can add a lot of different stuff to a material. Next one is normal map, which is basically bumpiness, high-tech bumpiness, if you will. And that one needs to have a custom texture type. So if you look at here, and all of these normal maps have not been changed. So I can either do this by clicking on this and going default to normal map, and then going apply. Or I can cheat and just go drag and drop into there, and it will come up with this texture is not marked as a normal map, and you can go fix now. Problem solved. So you've got that. Other ones that might come up in your building approaches would be emission. Emission basically makes it glow. So we can do that. And then you can change the intensity if you want as well. So when you add it to objects, this emissive also applies the bloom effect that is in the space, which has a slider in the settings and all that sort of stuff. This emissive will also affect light mapping. So once we get to that, you'll have your spotlights and your directional lights and your point lights and your area lights, but it will also take into consideration emissive. So that can light your space, which is pretty cool. You can put a texture here as well. So black would be no emissive, and then a color would be full. And then you can change intensity on that as well. Tiling allows you to adjust how tiled an asset is. Now, this works with tileable materials. So if you get a tileable material, it will repeat, and you can adjust as you need to. So we do this with the brick especially, it makes it very clear, and things like that, so that's super useful. If you need that. Now, if you're doing a character model, you probably won't use a tileable material. So the 0 to 1 unwrap space, e.g. the texture, will need to be inside that, not tiled, anything like that. So that's a whole different kettle of assets, so we won't worry about them today. The other one you might use, and I use this for animation, for example, is just offset. So it kind of moves the texture across the tile. You can't see that one so much. And you can animate a lot of these features, actually. So if I animated this, I would have a tiled material that goes across the unwrap. There's a lot of UV stuff. We'll be covering a lot of it today. So you can use that in really interesting ways to make cool assets or information passing around the space. So that's a good way to do it as well. Apart from that, you don't actually use that much more of this. Sometimes you might use secondary maps. You might use enabled GPU instancing or double-sided global illumination. These are optimization things. But as a second space, don't worry about it. Not anything you have to worry about today. So, let's get our rusty corrugated iron. Put that in there. You can make colored textures. So, apply the color to a texture. So if you want a bit of variation, you can do some sort of stuff with that, which is actually pretty cool. And we have our... oh no, that's it. So we want... Hang on. I thought I did a... Oh, maybe not. Let's just put this in and see what happens. Maybe it is that one. Interesting. Okay, so once again, using metallic and smoothness as a texture, and even then you can actually adjust the smoothness of it once you've applied it. So let's turn that down just a little bit. And then you got like a pretty cool effect there. So maybe I made the wrong metallic smoothness color. Anyway, so that's that. Let's do that again with the other materials. So we need metal, steel. Where's that one? Once again, if that comes up, just go fix now. Done, done. That's good. So I'm just using Control D to duplicate the texture. Fix now. Let's remove the metallic. So for that one, if you click on the little dot, all of your options come up that are in your space, and just go up the top and go none. And then we have that. Let's add maybe a little bit smoothness. That's fine. And the last one, brick wall. That's it. Control D. Brick wall. And brick wall. Now that one doesn't come up with fix now because I applied it to the texture itself. So we have... I didn't do that. What are you talking about? Oh, yeah, that's the thing. When you have 3 screens, whatever color is going on in my screen is like, that's it. That's what's going on. So I can do that. I can do like a bit of this. I have a full lighting. I also have like some hue lights as well, so I could put them there. Yeah, I have way too many light things in my apartment. Alrighty. Okay, so we have our 4 materials, and that's all we need. Now, of course, usually I'll do this kind of after the asset or at another point, but we're here. We have our textures, so we can do that. Let's do a custom skybox. We'll get that out of the way as well. So for that, we have our imported HDRI, or HDR texture. I think it accepts EXR and HDR. So we have just the texture, which I got from Polyhaven, which I think is also on that resources thing. But if you just go to Polyhaven, and then where is it? Go to HDRIs. You have all of their HDRIs, and there's a lot. Basically, I haven't gone anywhere else since I found this one. It kind of does all the things, and I believe they are CCO, so you can use them in your space if need be. So you just click on one you like, and then go download up the top. As an example, download. So the skybox is pretty much the only one. Yeah, the fourth screen in my case is the TV. So, 2 portraits, 1 landscape, and a TV. All of my lighting is Philips Hue. Watching movies with a Philips Hue that changes colors depending on whatever's on the screen. Lots of fun. Especially Zootopia. Like, each area in that movie, my whole apartment is that color. It's really cool. All right, so it's very easy to get distracted in workshops. I like it. Feel free to chat, but just know that's going to happen. So the skybox is pretty much the only texture that could be 496 by 4096. It's very big, but it's the skybox, so it kind of needs to be, unless it's a simpler skybox. So you can, if you wanted to, download smaller ones. I wouldn't recommend an 8K. Like, the file size is ridiculously high. HDR or EXR, not too sure about the difference, to be honest. I use them both interchangeably, I think. And then just go download into your folder structure. So I've already got this one from last week. So once you have your texture in the space, we go up to, which one? Texture shape. And go cube. And then go apply. So it's not texture type, it's texture shape. Go cube. And then it'll do that. The next thing we need to do is go create a material. Call it whatever you want. I just go with skybox usually, because I only have one. And then up the top, we have standard skybox cube map. And then we grab our cubed texture, drag it into there. If you want to, you can change the exposure, you can change the rotation here as well. You can even change the tint color. But once that is done, you can go drag on there. Now notice how the floor changed color. The skybox does affect the lighting, and you can sort of define how much it affects the lighting. So keep that in mind. But and all of these skyboxes will change the environment as well. So some of them are darker, some of them are lighter. And one of the benefits of this is it sort of shows you what the result looks like on different colors. So you can actually sort of do a bit of your lighting exploration, I guess, with the colors of this website. So really, really good website. Highly recommended. So we have our custom skybox and our ground. We also have our textures already made. So when we import our asset, we can just drag and drop as needed. Now, if this is your first time in Unity for your second space, a quick overview, because these are pretty important things. So, if you collapse all of these assets, this is very important, because if this isn't this way, Mono will break, basically. And it will tell you here if you press on QA. So, we have a few hints here. So all of your assets need to be in the space game object. So if I put this asset here, for example, so when you collapse it, it's got two of them. When you go QA, it says, I don't like that. Fix it. So if we do that, it is fixed. The space game object has a space tag. So keep that in mind. Portals, very similar situation. So everything needs to be under this game object, e.g. the portal prefabs. So if you want portals that link to other mintable spaces, minted spaces, sorry, then you can do that. If you delete that by accident or on purpose, but you want it back, you can find them in the Mona assets folder down here. So we actually have 3 types of portals. So we have the arch, we have the disc, and we have the door. There we go. Cool. Let's move them over there. Right, Yunji. In regards to that kind of thing, my approach to that would be basically to create a sphere asset or a box asset, like depending on what kind of foreground. Let's use that. So foreground and background. So if you want a foreground, you could literally make like a cylinder, if it was like buildings and stuff, and then use opacity as a texture. So it's basically an asset that you would make to create that environment, if that makes sense. The catch with that is that object would have to be really, really big, whereas the skybox is just outside everything. So you could do it, but it would basically be making an asset inside the space to replicate that, if that makes sense. Hopefully that answers your questions. Feel free to continue said question if it doesn't. I'm going to jump into the portals for a second. Okay, so the assets portals basically will be the top asset will have a portal layer tag. So once again, if you close it, it will be there. This object, like the portal prefab itself, does not have a tag. You can name this whatever you want. This one, though, unique portal name _2, does have a unique name. So this needs to be a unique name. So if you had, let's do this so I can show you exactly. So we have 2 portal tagged assets that have the same name, and it will not like it. So it will show you where it doesn't like that. So that's 100% a thing. But in this case, we have 1, 2, and 3. So portal tagged object needs to have a unique name and a box collider. The box collider is important in that this is what the user will see. So if I wanted this door to be like bigger, so if they could look at any of this, that would make the door in that space. Note that this box collider is also a collider, like a physical collider. And if you put the assets, like the visual assets of the portal, with a box collider as well, the problem is that the portal might not be seen, because ray casting, so casting a line from your camera, will fight for that. So if you have a, let's say, a door collider, physical collider, so you don't run into it, in front of the portal collider, you can't see the portal at all. So make sure that the unique portal name asset has a collider, and that it is on top of any of the physical ones, or just use that as the collider. So usually I'll remove all my assets or box collider assets on the asset itself and just leave it to the one on the portal itself. So then you don't have to worry about conflicting colliders. This comes up in a few different things. So portals comes up in artifacts. It comes in reactor as well. So when you're walking into a collider or you're clicking on a collider. So overlapping colliders is semi-common problem that a lot of builders have. So just keep that in mind. Yes, so I did that actually in my Hex gallery space. This is before Mona actually was compatible with skyboxes. We actually had a big sphere around things, and I of course animated mine with like earth around it and a huge what do you call them, O'Neill cylinder. I still need to update that space to 2022. I haven't got around to it yet, but I wanted to. That was before we even had canvases and stuff like that, so I'm trying to get it up to date with all of the cool stuff that we've added since then. But I'll get there one day. Okay. And the last thing in Portal is the assets, which is basically the physical assets that represent what you're trying to create. So that's Portals. Artifacts is similar. So an artifact is a child of the parent game object. Where is this one? There. Artifacts are basically, at this point, assets that will be modifiable after you mint a space in the future. So you'll be able to enable or disable, move, rotate, and things like that. It also allows you to link to a website. So if you have an NFT that you want to add to the space, note that an owner will have access to that NFT. They'll have that asset on there in the mintable files. So if you don't want them to have that asset, do not put it in the space. But if you do, or you want something else that has a link, so maybe just a cool sculptor that links to your folio page, or an NFT marketplace, or you can do that with an artifact. Similar situation, the artifact, this one has artifact layer on the parent. Artifact prefab itself does not have a tag. Unique artifact name does have a tag, which is artifact, not artifact layer. Name these as you see fit, but once again, they have to be unique. So unique portal name doesn't sound very useful. Arch portal or portal at back or lobby portal would probably be better. If you're selling the space, you want the owner to know what is doing. Also, if someone links to that space, that is the name that they will see. So if you want to link to, if you want someone else to link to your space, and they say, oh, where can I go? And it's like unique portal 1, unique portal 2, unique portal 3, you're not really helping them. So name your portals well. Same with this one. So an artifact, if I press F, I can zoom in. Once again, this box collider is where I see the artifact. So my little dot or reticle in the space, once it rolls over this, can say, hey, here's an artifact. And then you can click on it and then go to the website. And usually I would, and that is also a physical collider. The artifact itself, I usually take off the collider because of that overlapping collider issue. So that's that. So yeah. But we don't want artifacts, we want canvases, and we'll get to them later, because we're going to put them in later. Let's get rid of those two. Let's keep door. So that's it. That's the summary of a Mona space. Through and through. Any questions from the floor? If not, we're going to jump into Blender and make some cool assets. There's like a 10 to 20 second lag between me saying something and anyone messaging, so I'm just giving you a moment to answer. Either way, let's open up Blender. Famous default cube. I'm going to keep it, actually, because I'm going to make the space with that. Now, if I recall, I forget how big it was. I think the space I made was 20 by 40. We'll find out the hard way. Okay. Let's go into some Blender things. Middle mouse. Every app has different controls. I hate it. It's annoying. Why we don't have a universal society, I don't know. We'll get there one day, maybe. So, middle mouse button will rotate. Alt. Nope. There we go. Shift. Excellent. Shift middle mouse button will move it around. Zoom with the mouse scroll. So basically, middle mouse is everything in Blender. In Unity, and I didn't cover this, zoom with middle mouse scroll, middle mouse down to pan, and right mouse click to orbit. In perspective setting, if you hold right mouse click, you can actually sort of navigate the space with WASD. So that can be useful. But because I bounce between orthographic, or isometric, sorry. Oh, it does. Okay. So left and right works, but if you go forward and back, it changes the clipping. So you can sort of see that there. So because I bounce between these two quite a bit, I usually don't use that, but it's there if you want it. Zoom. Also, if you just press F in Unity, so you can click an element up here and just go F and F again if you want to zoom in again. So F allows you to focus. So that's usually how I navigate the Unity space. Very quickly. Same thing again in Blender. Middle mouse, click, zoom, and shift middle. Right mouse click in Blender is just that. This is the default. Blender allows you to kind of use other application controls in the preferences if you want to, but for this one, I generally go or stick with Blender because I wanted to learn the Blender way, because when you're watching tutorials, most people will also use the Blender way, and like knowing the hotkeys is pretty important.